BloodStream Journeys is produced by BloodStream Media and made possible exclusively by BioMarin. Hi there, I'm Heather Robb, and this is Journeys, a new monthly podcast from BloodStream Media that features the stories of 3 individuals within the bleeding disorders community. I hope this finds you well, despite the extraordinary circumstances we're all in. There are so many different challenges facing us, and I hope that today's episode can give you a much-needed boost, or at least a respite. Today we hear from 3 young men who have accomplished incredible things against all odds. Their journeys from child to young adult have shattered the expectations of what many might think possible, and remind all of us that we are capable of so much more than we may sometimes believe. Our first contributor is Seth Rojhani. When Seth was less than a year old, surgery to remove a cancerous tumor left him a T2 paraplegic. But that didn't stop him from becoming an Olympic athlete. Here is Seth Rojhani.
Ever work so hard to accomplish a goal and then finally get to that moment where all the hard work and determination had paid off to reach that goal? Well, for me, that moment came in the summer of 2017 in Israel at the 2017 McCabe Games, winning the bronze medal for Team USA in wheelchair basketball. Now, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and determination went into creating that moment, and it all started at an instance when I was 6 months old. When I was 6 months old, my parents found out an abnormal lump in my side/chest area and decided to take me into the doctor's office for a checkup. Little did they know that our lives was about to change forever. After some testing, I was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, a type of cancer that affects the nervous system of the body. On top of that, I was also diagnosed with severe hemophilia A at the same time. Now, both of these things came as a huge shock to my family, as A, there was no previous history of hemophilia on either side of my family, and neither of my parents have ever even heard of hemophilia before, and B, any news of cancer was a shock, especially to a 6-month-old baby who seemed perfectly healthy up until that point. Immediately, I went in for emergency surgery to remove this cancerous tumor. The surgery was successful and the tumor was removed, and the doctors told us that the cancer would never return. Well, when I was 11 months old, the same kind of bump returned in the same little location, and it happened that I was diagnosed with neuroblastoma again. But this time, it was a little worse. So I again went in for emergency surgery to remove the tumor. Although they successfully removed the tumor, the doctors also accidentally severed my spinal cord during the surgery, leaving me a T2 paraplegic for the rest of my life. Growing up as a kid and being in a wheelchair with severe hemophilia was difficult for a multitude of reasons. One of those reasons being I was an extremely active kid and I loved sports. I wanted to play any sport and all sports possible. But I especially loved basketball, and I especially wanted to play basketball. Growing up in Denver, Colorado, my favorite basketball team was the Denver Nuggets, and my favorite player was Dikembe Mutombo, aka Tumbo. I remember having a conversation with my mom in the car on the way back from a Nuggets game, and I told her that I want to be like Tumbo, but she had to have the difficult conversation with me as a 6-year-old that I couldn't exactly be like Tumbo, but I could be a sit-down Tumbo. And I really took that to heart, not only athletically, but personally. I wanted to be the best sit-down Tumbo wheelchair basketball player I could be, but I also wanted to be the best sit-down Seth that I could be, given my circumstances. So I was determined to play basketball. My parents tried to get me as involved as possible and tried as hard as they could to get me involved in club teams, rec teams, school teams, whatever they could find. But they were always told no, whether being because of me being in a wheelchair, the hemophilia, both, or whether they just didn't like my face. We were always told no. My parents decided that those no's were not an acceptable answer, and we were determined to find an avenue for me to play sports and do the things that I wanted and loved to do. And after meeting a community member, we had heard about the start of a juniors wheelchair basketball program called the Denver Junior Rolling Nuggets. This was a competitive wheelchair basketball team for kids ages 14 to 18 to play competitive wheelchair basketball and travel the country for games and tournaments. I ended up being on the first team when it started when I was only 11 years old and became heavily involved with them for the rest of my childhood. I also became involved with a lot of other sports, including sled hockey, as I made the adult sled hockey team when I was 15 years old. I also skied. I was the youngest person ever to start skiing with the National Sports Center for the Disabled when I was 3 years old. And then throughout my childhood, I also played many more adaptive sports programs, including wheelchair tennis, softball, and swimming. At the beginning of playing, I faced a difficult decision of who do I tell? Do I tell my teammates and coaches about my hemophilia? I felt that it was extremely important to educate my teammates on hemophilia just in case anything were to happen to me. But I also made it clear to all my coaches that I was not to be treated any differently than any other athlete. I was there to win, I was there to give 100% of my effort every day, and I was there to be the best athlete and teammate I could be. My main two sports growing up ended up being wheelchair basketball and sled hockey, which for those of you who haven't seen, I definitely recommend YouTubing some videos because I believe some of the best athletes to play sports happen to be in wheelchairs just because of what they're able to do with such limited function. Wheelchair basketball and sled hockey are also two very physical sports, so the only way I was going to be able to play these two sports was to make a deal with my local hemophilia treatment center. The deal was that I could only play these two sports as long as I stayed on schedule with my prophylactic treatment plan, meaning I could not miss a dose. On days that I knew I was going to be more active with either practices or games or tournaments, I knew I had to take an extra dose to keep my body as healthy as possible. My mom always told me that I'm only going to get one body in life, so I may as well keep it as healthy as possible. And it's true, no matter how much I would like a full body replacement, it's just never going to happen for me or for anybody else, so I needed to keep my body as healthy as possible. Now, injuries and bleeds are going to come with playing sports. You can't prevent all bleeds, but I knew that if I did have a bleed, that I needed to rest until I was fully recovered from that bleed. I also knew that I could not hide a bleed because A, I knew I could not be the best athlete I wanted to be if I played injured and possibly injure myself more, and B, my mom could sniff out a bleed like a chocolate chip cookie in the house. It was impossible to hide them from her. The only way that this deal with my HTC was going to work was to have an open line of communication between myself, my parents, my coaches, and my HTC treatment staff. Everybody knew what situations I was in and where I was going for games, just in case anything were to happen. A plan was in place to take care of it. Also, it helped develop my treatment plan so I could be the best athlete I could be while keeping my body as healthy as possible. I kept this deal with my HTC throughout my youth and into my teenage years as I kept playing sports. My hard work and determination really started to pay off as I was starting to get recognized. I won the Most Inspirational Athlete Award for the state of Colorado when I was 9 years old. I also won numerous awards for wheelchair basketball, tennis, sled hockey, and many other sports throughout my years of playing. But all of this has led up to that defining moment as I continued to play wheelchair basketball and was able to play wheelchair basketball in an international competition such as the McCabe Games for Team USA in the summer of 2017. It was a huge honor for me to be able to represent my country playing the sport that I love in wheelchair basketball. But it was an even bigger honor for me to be unanimously named captain by my Team USA wheelchair basketball team teammates. That brings us to that defining moment of being presented that bronze medal we earned around our neck and being able to look back at my journey and how I got here with all the hard work and determination to fight through numerous setbacks and challenges in life, but not letting that stop me from getting to where I wanted and pursuing my goals. A saying that I have always lived by and was instilled in me from a very early age came from my dad, and he said, "Always think positive and good things will happen." And I truly do believe that to be the case, as I have had challenges and obstacles in my life, just as any other person in this world pursuing their goals. Hemophilia was one of those obstacles in life, but I never let it be a roadblock in the path of life. I only saw it as a speed bump. Yes, it took a little extra effort to get over that speed bump, but thinking positive and keeping a positive mindset on life helped me get over that speed bump so I could pursue my goals, not only athletically, but personally. It all culminated in that moment of wearing that bronze medal and knowing we all can accomplish anything and overcome obstacles and challenges in life with hard work, determination, and a positive outlook on life.
Next, we're going to hear from Carson McCabe. Carson is a budding young filmmaker who recently graduated high school and is now pursuing his dreams. Juggling his hemophilia along with the demands of his career ambitions has been difficult, and like any career in the arts, it's an uphill climb. But he is forging ahead and finding his path. Here's Carson.
Growing up with hemophilia has always brought us challenges. As I got older and learned more about my bleeding disorder, I started to feel more comfortable with my treatment and myself. My friends knew about my condition and understood what it meant, and I always had my parents by my side to help me get through moments where I felt like my bleeding disorder separates me from other people. I think the most challenging moments I've experienced with my bleeding disorder have happened over the past year of my life. In the past year, I've experienced the transition from child to adult. I graduated high school and began working a full-time job in the restaurant industry. At first, working in a kitchen brought about many concerns around my condition, as going into a new environment always does. At my new job, along came the usual questions associated with a bleeding disorder. I explained the best that I could, but some people still don't quite understand the concept. The real problem was when I was burned while working in the kitchen. I splashed hot oil on myself and had to run my hand under cold water for a while. People began asking if I was okay, and I mentioned my bleeding disorder. Without hesitation, they insisted on sending me home early. Although I was glad to know my coworkers were concerned about my safety, it seemed as though from that point on, every time I had a minor accident or injury, everyone was on overly high alert. I felt that everyone at my work looked at me differently, as if I was a liability. I am happy to have a team of people who care about my well-being, but I now have a simultaneous insecurity about other people's perception of me and my condition. Something that I have noticed has become even more apparent as I've grown into my adult skin. While cooking is not my main passion in life, it's always been an interest of mine, so I was lucky my disorder didn't prevent me from doing something I like for work. I sometimes feel hemophilia limits me and makes me somewhat of a burden. I know that's not what people in my position would like to say or hear, but it's the truth. My friends, coworkers, and family members are concerned for my health, for which I am grateful. However, this also leads into the inevitable event that I get injured, and they, on some level, panic. They begin asking questions like how I am feeling, do I need medicine or medical attention, am I going to bleed out or die, etc., etc. These are all causes for concern, of course, and I feel somewhat responsible for causing them this anxiety, even though my disorder is both out of my control and theirs. Alongside this, I feel it sometimes prohibits my professional life. My superiors and colleagues want to tiptoe around the subject so as not to offend me. Subsequently, this hypersensitivity can feel like they're talking down to me. I sometimes worry that people will lose faith in me or be hesitant to trust me with high-profile responsibilities. This worries me as I strive to move further in my career and aspirations. Over the past few years, I've grown into a career as a filmmaker. While that means doing freelance work and making short films with my friends when we have time off of work, I aspire to be someone who can inspire others through the medium of film. There isn't much of a film industry in Denver, so sometimes the job searching and lack of work can be discouraging. While I try to make the best of what I can where I am, it can feel like I am stuck. Kind of a similar feeling to having a bleeding disorder. Sometimes it can be discouraging and annoying to deal with these everyday obstacles, but in the end it has taught me more about how to overcome challenges and not let your situation hold you back from doing what you want to do. I believe that my insecurities of having a bleeding disorder have been the hardest part of my transition to adulthood. When I graduated high school, my friends moved on to college or into their careers, and as it naturally happens, a lot of my relationships with those friends have moved on. As I build new relationships and new friendships with more people in the working world, I always run into the challenge of sharing about my bleeding disorder. This is challenging because of how ill-informed people really are. My friends that I have grown up with have learned about my disorder and have a basic understanding of my limitations. However, I find that new people I meet and want to create relationships with know nothing about this disease. Sadly, this can leave me with a sense of loneliness. It can feel like no one knows what I'm going through and no one will ever understand. It ends with me feeling isolated and unmotivated to make new, strong connections with people. Most people my age do feel a sense of loneliness, whether it's because of moving away from their parents or leaving their friends and everything they've known. With my disease, this feeling can be intensified, and to me that's the scariest part. Leaving my parents and everything I've known is a concept I'm quite familiar with. I have considered moving away from home multiple times in hopes to get my foot in the door of the film industry. I wanted to move as soon as I graduated high school, decided not to, and then a few months later I put together all the planning I needed, but then ultimately decided to stay and build up some more money into a savings account. Through these experiences, and seeing my sisters leave home to pursue careers or schooling, I have always felt like I have a grasp on what the situation would be like. My treatment for hemophilia has been something my parents have helped me out with a great deal. They place my orders, help me infuse my factor, and make sure I always have everything I need to be healthy. As I maneuver my newfound adulthood, I have come to the realization that I will have to become more responsible for my own treatment. In order to become fully independent, I have to take on the financial responsibility of caring for myself, as well as creating new relationships with medical care professionals to ensure they care for my needs accordingly. This is a daunting task, as it is something I have never done by myself, and alongside the struggles most young adults face when tasked with the real world, I have an additional set of hurdles that makes the transition to adulthood that much more difficult. Despite all of this, hemophilia does not come without some benefits. I have discovered a tight-knit community of people like me. I have met people with aspirations, dreams, accomplishments, and possibly, most important, people who understand me and my struggle. I also find that meeting new people, despite its struggles, opens new opportunities to inform people about my disease, something they would remain ignorant about if I were to not speak up and act as an advocate for myself and people like me. My disease allows me to open new doors for people who can spread the word, remove the stigma, and create a better environment for all disabilities, including hemophilia. I am not just someone with a blood disorder. I'm an artist, a filmmaker, and an advocate.
Lastly, we're going to hear from Brandon Schrom. Like so many young people with hemophilia, Brandon was told early on that he couldn't play sports. Flash forward to him competing in bodybuilding events and even lifting a car. I will let Brandon take you through the unlikely twists and turns of his journey. Here is Brandon Schrom.
In 1993, when my parents told my grandparents that they were going to have me, their response was not what you would expect. "What are you doing?" my grandfather said to my dad. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, and this disease is a nightmare." You see, they had lost their son, my Uncle Jeffrey, to hemophilia in the 1980s when he was just 17, and that kind of thing is going to scar you, of course, especially being a parent. But my parents handled it really well despite being very young, 21 and 24 respectively. I'm 27 now, and I can barely figure out how to dress and what to wear to work every day. So I think about a lot about how strong my parents were and how strong they had to be to raise a child with hemophilia. They stepped right up to the plate and did an amazing job. And of course, once my grandparents learned how drastically treatments had improved since the 80s, they were over the moon to have a grandson. Growing up with severe hemophilia A, my parents always encouraged me to push my boundaries and just try to experience life to the best of my ability, and I'm still doing that today. When I was little, I remember waking up one morning to find my dad had gotten me a snowmobile. He spent that winter teaching me how to ride it safely, and my parents also got me into sports really young, like the basic ones, soccer, t-ball, and baseball. But there was a point where my doctors told me I couldn't play anymore because it was starting to get rough and I had a target joint in my left ankle. I still have a target joint in that left ankle today. It doesn't really give me problems anymore, but it's still there. So my parents pulled me out, and then I really wasn't all that active. Between my inactivity and my wonderful grandmothers who loved to feed me cookies, I gained a lot of weight. But I was really fortunate because around 12 or 13, my mom decided to be a role model for me and get healthy, and she lost a total of, I think, 80 pounds. And with that, I was inspired to join a swim team in 7th grade. I was still overweight, swimming wasn't around all year, so it was only a short amount of time that I was active. But the real turning point for me in my activity and my health was the summer before my junior year of high school. I decided, all right, I need to get in shape now. I was 16 years old. My joints were hurting. My ankle was hurting. My knees were hurting. I was in constant pain all the time. So I made the decision to get healthy. I continued to swim again, and I sort of got addicted to just working out and just training. Swimming was great for me because it was easy on my joints. It's not a contact sport. And I even did a bodybuilding competition. Those shows where you wear a banana hammock and do a ridiculous diet and get all tan and, pose and stuff. And it was quite an experience, and I am always grateful for that. And it taught me a lot about dieting, and it taught me the pros and cons of dieting. And it gave me a lot of confidence for sure. But you're all wondering, how do my grandparents think about my physically active lifestyle? My grandmother has always been a worrywart, my Grandma Carol. To this day, she says, if I could keep you in a bubble, I would. And when I was playing t-ball, for example, She and my pa would take me to practice, and she would make me wear the catcher's mitt while I was playing in the outfield, just in case I would get hit by a ball. And as you can tell, being an 8 to 9-year-old boy and having to wear a catcher's mitt in the outfield is it's quite a laugh for some people. But I know that they were always super proud of me. And my grandfather, Alan, my grampy, recently passed away in September, and he was the father of my Uncle Jeffrey and his recent wife, Dawn, my gram. She told me that he would always say that he always lived Jeffrey's life through me. And that really resonates with me, and that's something that I've always thought about and carried on. And that's why I try to experience life to the most of my ability. I went to college. I've seen the world with my jobs. I'm active, and he always bragged about me until the day he passed. So that pushes me to try to just do everything I possibly can with the time that I'm given on this earth. Getting passionate about fitness is something that definitely changed my life. Something else that changed my life was being able to go to camp for the first time. Double H Ranch specifically, up in the Adirondack Mountains, founded by Paul Newman and that group. I was about 6 years old when I went for the first time, and I remember being in tears when my parents dropped me off because I missed them and I didn't want them to go. But I also remember being in tears when my parents came to pick me up 6 days later because I didn't want to leave camp. Camp is such an amazing place and gave me confidence, made me feel like I was normal. I was a normal boy. And you think that only lasts while you're at camp, but it literally carries on to the rest of your life. It made me feel like, I am a normal kid. I can do anything I want to do. Hemophilia is not a roadblock. Camp, especially Double H, I don't have the privilege of working at any other camps, but with Double H, their motto is they don't say no to kids. It's inclusive. They make everything inclusive to the best of their ability, depending on the child's disability. And it's very prominent there, especially when I went back as a counselor and as a volunteer. And that camp is always going to have a special place in my heart. Getting choked up. The combination, though, of fitness and camp, helped me find and open up a lot of avenues for me to experience the world. I've hiked mountains. I've taken my bike literally everywhere. I've deadlifted cars. I've held really heavy logs over my head. And even though I don't identify exclusively as a hemophiliac, I identify as myself, as a scientist, among other things. And it's so cool to show that hemophiliacs can be strong and be smart. I'm proud of the stuff I've accomplished with my bleeding disorder. I'm always going to be an advocate. I don't try to hide it. But on the job application, I've never once put that I have a disability because I don't think it's a disability to me. It doesn't hinder me. Without it, I wouldn't have traveled the world with USA Cycling as a sports scientist, and I wouldn't have the career that I have today. I'm a human performance researcher for the U.S. Navy and their Warfighter Performance Unit in San Diego. So coming from a little boy who grew up in upstate New York and had, everything put against him, the combination of camp and my wonderful family having my back is the reason I'm here today, and it's the reason why I've experienced everything I have. And I'm so grateful for all of those aspects of my journey that have led me here, and I'm excited where the next journey is and where the next adventure is.
This episode of BloodStream Journeys was written by Heather Robb, featuring real-life stories from Seth Rojhani, Carson McCabe, and Brandon Schrom. This episode was produced by Rob Bradford, Avra Friedman, and Joshua Sterling Bragg. Audio editing and sound design by Joshua Sterling Bragg and Colby Crow. Distribution and engagement by Avra Friedman and Colby Crow. Art and promotion by Katie Wright Mead and Ryan Galen. And BloodStream Journeys is executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Galen. If you want to reflect on your journey to this moment right here, and tell your story, visit us at bloodstreammedia.com/mystory. We have a simple form. Write your story in it. Or tell us a little about yourself and what you want to write about, even if you don't yet know how. And click submit. We'll be in touch, and together we'll get your story told. BloodStream Journeys would not be possible without the incredible ongoing support of BioMarin, so we say thank you to BioMarin for their vision and generosity and all the ways they empower the bleeding disorders community to learn, heal, and grow through self-expression. Thank you, BioMarin. Other BloodStream podcasts include the community touchstone, the BloodStream Podcast. BloodStream is an entertaining and informative podcast hosted by Natalie and Patrick Lynch and provides a 360-degree look at the bleeding disorders community through news, interviews, and informed opinionating on the topics that matter most. We also produce the popular Ask the Expert podcast. Ask the Expert was created to help answer some of the biggest questions we receive from community members, both online and in person, as we travel the country producing content and live events for the community. Ask the Expert is hosted by Believe's Director of Innovation and former nonprofit executive, Amy Board, and features the top community experts on new subjects every episode. Also, there will be a bunch of new shows and podcasts coming throughout 2020 from BloodStream Media. So be sure to visit www.bloodstreammedia.com for all of the shows produced by us. Or you can search BloodStream Media anywhere podcasts are distributed, downloaded, streamed, or watched. Happy listening.